Hi everyone, my name is Emma and I decided to do my presentation on industrial agriculture. This topic is pretty close to home for me because I live in Maine where we have a lot of small farms, even though they're mostly for potatoes. Maine does not have many large farms, so I was unsure of exactly what industrial agriculture was and what its impacts were until I started my research. So what exactly is industrial agriculture? Industrial agriculture is a form of modern farming that refers to the industrialized production of livestock, poultry, fish, and crops. I have found that it is unsustainable and it is an expensive way of producing food for large-scale human consumption. There are also many major issues with it. The first issue being air pollution. Industrial agriculture produces roughly 1/3 of the world's greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are the gases that absorb and emit radiant energy within the thermal infrared range. Greenhouse gases cause the greenhouse effect on planets, in turn causing global warming. Methane is the first greenhouse gas I'm going to talk about. In industrial agriculture, it's produced mostly by cows. And during my research, I read an interesting article that said if all cows in the world lived in one place, such as an island, which was the analogy the article used, just by digesting what they eat, they would produce more methane than any other part of the world, by nearly 5 times. Another way methane is produced is by tilling or turning over cow-grazed land, as well as uncovered manure storage. I have included a picture of both examples. The top right is uncovered manure storage. As you can see, there is no top on this pit, and manure is just being pumped into it, and as it sits, it releases methane at an alarming rate. The bottom middle is tilling. This is essentially taking lower soil and moving it to the top because it is more nutrient rich. This slide talks about nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide enters the atmosphere through fertilizer application as well as tilling land that fertilizer has been applied to. This picture that I included is a truck spreading possibly dangerous fertilizer onto crops, as well as burning fossil fuels, producing CO2, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Industrial agriculture requires a lot of heavy machinery and electricity, which are all run by fossil fuels. And as we know, when we burn oil or fossil fuels, that produces carbon dioxide. As you can see from this picture, it takes 3 large tractors to push this one piece of equipment. Before this industrial age, this technique would have been performed by horses. Part of the requirements for this project was to look at what your major is and connect it to your issue. I am a med bio major, so I was very interested in the health impacts of industrial farming, and I was surprised to find so many. In order to grow crops or livestock to be bigger and better at a faster rate, industrial farmers use antibiotics. The same antibiotics we might be given by a health professional to treat any sort of infection. This is a problem because when we eat, we take in small amounts of these antibiotics, and that lessens their effects on any common infection. The use of antibiotics is bad for the animal, bad for humans, and they are purely for financial gain by the industry. The next effect industrial agriculture has on our health is the use of pesticides. It is very common for pesticides to be used to prevent unwanted pests from eating our crops. But what exactly do they do to us? Pesticides increase your risk for cancers and endocrine and reproductive disruption. This is why you should always wash your produce. It is so important. The last health impact I want to talk about is animal fat consumption. Consuming animal fats is linked to chronic illnesses such as high cholesterol, diet, and diabetes. The image I included may seem graphic, but after years of consuming animal fat, that is what your arteries may look like. They could be filled with cholesterol, putting you at a much greater risk for heart disease. When the blood flow can no longer get to your heart, that is when you could have a heart attack. The last impact I want to talk about is loss of biodiversity and toxins. As we know, using pesticides destroys pests, but it also destroys biodiversity. It not only kills the pests you are trying to get rid of, but also the microbiome in the soil and many other harmless insects. And with industrial agriculture as the new norm in farming, use is up 500%. When I started looking up pictures for this slide, I noticed that all of the pictures had people wearing these insane yellow hazmat suits. So if they're not as harmless as they tell us they are, why are the hazmat suits necessary? And as we know, I said earlier, pesticides increase your risk for cancer, as well as endocrine and reproductive issues. Another thing shrinking biodiversity is deforestation. Forests are being cut down to create barren farmland, destroying the habitats of hundreds of species. Destroying these habitats forces wild animals into our neighborhood and reduces oxygen production. This is not only happening with forests, this is also happening with swamplands. Swamplands are what's known as a carbon sink. So when you destroy that area, it now releases tons and tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, further adding to the global warming crisis. Toxins come from all kinds of places. One I didn't know about was foot baths. Foot baths are infection control for large-scale farms in which all of the cattle walk through a copper nitrate solution and then go back to the field. In school, we use copper nitrate often, and as you know, when we use it, goggles and gloves are required. Yet, calves and cows are walking through it freely and bringing it right back out to the fields that they eat in. As you can see from the picture that I included. As the cows walk back out into the fields and it rains, the copper then seeps into the groundwater or onto other waterways and into our drinking water. And then we essentially drink excess copper in our water. Some amounts of heavy metals, like iron, are okay for us, but it's not good to drink excess copper. In conclusion, I talked about industrial agriculture's impact on greenhouse gases, our health, and loss of biodiversity and toxins. It is scary to think that the food we eat can cause such a problem for the environment. I have decided that industrial agriculture is not sustainable. It is bad for us, the environment, our wallets, and all of the other organisms that we share this planet with. I believe there are many ways to help solve this problem. You could eat less meat, not become vegan or vegetarian, just move your meat consumption to 1 time a day. Switching to non-dairy options such as almond milk or oat milk, or even supporting your local farms. These are all ways that you could help solve this massive problem of industrial agriculture. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and these are my citations.